I'm 32 years old, and my marriage to my wife, Teresa, just ended in a way I could never have imagined. Looking back, we had 8 years together, 4 of them as husband and wife. We met during college at a party hosted by a mutual friend. Teresa, 30, was outgoing and self-assured, her confidence catching my eye immediately. I was the reserved engineering major, while Teresa studied business and was on track to build a solid career. Though opposites in some ways, we bonded over our shared love for the outdoors and trying new cuisines, and the spark between us was undeniable. Our first date, however, was a complete disaster. I forgot my wallet and spilled wine on her dress. But Teresa laughed it off, taking it all in stride. We ended up walking around campus, talking late into the night. From that moment, I knew she was special. As we kept dating, I admired her drive and ambition. Teresa came from a working-class family, which fueled her determination to succeed. I respected how she balanced her studies, part-time jobs, and an internship, all while encouraging me to push myself out of my comfort zone. She motivated me to take on competitive internships and leadership roles, which gave me confidence I didn't know I had. After graduation, we both landed great jobs in the city. Teresa started at a thriving consulting firm, and I joined an engineering company. We moved in together after a year and got engaged soon after. Our wedding was an intimate affair, with only close friends and family. I remember how stunning Teresa looked in her simple white dress, and how lucky I felt standing next to her, about to start our lives together. The early years of our marriage were incredible. We both progressed in our careers, allowing us to travel and enjoy the excitement of city life. We had a close-knit group of friends, and our apartment became the regular spot for dinner parties and game nights. Communication was one of our strengths. While we had the usual disagreements, we always made an effort to listen to each other and find a compromise. What I loved most about Teresa was her independence. She was into yoga and painting, while I enjoyed basketball and tinkering with old cars. We both valued our personal hobbies, creating a healthy balance between us time and individual pursuits. But all of that changed when my older brother, Mason, was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. Mason and I had always been close. He wasn't just my brother, but my best friend, confidant, and role model. Growing up, he was the one who taught me to ride a bike, helped with homework, and gave advice on everything from school to dating. When our parents divorced during my teenage years, Mason, who was in college at the time, became my support system. He would call daily, checking in on me, and even came home most weekends to make sure I was okay. He encouraged me to go to college, and was the one who helped me move into my dorm. At my wedding, his best man speech had everyone in tears. When Mason was diagnosed, it hit me like a truck. He had always been the picture of health, running marathons, eating well, and living a balanced life. It seemed cruel, unfair. I remember sitting in the doctor's office with him and his wife, Sarah, feeling the world crumble around us. From that day forward, I devoted as much time as I could to be there for him. I took him to chemo appointments, stayed with him at the hospital, and tried to keep his spirits up in whatever way I could. Teresa was supportive at first. She would often join me in visiting him and helped Sarah with meals and chores. But as the weeks turned into months, she began to complain. Teresa said I was spending too much time with Mason and neglecting our relationship. I tried explaining how important it was to be there for my brother during such a challenging time, but she seemed resentful. We began to argue frequently, mainly about my schedule or how she felt overlooked. I did everything I could to balance my time between Mason and Teresa, but it was exhausting. Mason's condition worsened rapidly, and being with him felt urgent and necessary. At the same time, I felt guilt for not being fully present with Teresa. It was a no-win situation, and the stress was overwhelming. Despite the aggressive treatments, Mason passed away just 8 months after his diagnosis. I was devastated. He had been such a constant in my life, and I couldn't picture a world without him. The grief was all-consuming. I took a leave of absence from work, barely left the house, and some days, I could hardly get out of bed. Everything reminded me of him: TV shows we used to watch, inside jokes we shared, even certain foods he loved. Teresa tried to support me initially, but her patience ran out quickly. She kept pushing me to get back to normal, planning outings or inviting friends over. But I wasn't ready. I couldn't just bounce back after losing someone so close. Teresa took it personally, accusing me of shutting her out. For 3 months, I was locked in a fog of grief. I was seeing a grief counselor and doing my best to cope, but it was a process that required time. Teresa, however, became more distant and short-tempered. I thought maybe she just needed a break from the heaviness, so I tried to be understanding. But then one day, I got a call that shattered whatever was left of my heart. It was Liam, Mason's best friend since childhood. Liam had always been like a second brother to me, and he'd been a huge support after Mason's death. But this call was different. He told me he'd seen Teresa at a hotel with another man. At first, I refused to believe it. The Teresa I knew would never do that, especially while I was grieving. But then Liam sent me a photo he'd taken, showing Teresa in a passionate embrace with a man I didn't recognize. My world fell apart. How could Teresa, the woman I trusted completely, do this to me, especially now, in my darkest moment? When she got home that evening, I confronted her, showing her the photo. At first, she denied everything, insisting it wasn't what it looked like. But eventually, she broke down and admitted to having an affair with a coworker. Her excuse? She said she felt neglected and lonely, that I wasn't meeting her needs, and that she deserved to be happy. She even tried to turn it around on me, suggesting that I'd driven her to cheat by being so emotionally unavailable. I was furious, heartbroken. The betrayal was too deep, and I knew I couldn't stay with someone who could do this, especially at such a vulnerable time. I told Teresa I wanted a divorce. She begged me to reconsider, crying and pleading, saying she still loved me and that it was all a mistake. But I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. The trust was gone. After that, Teresa called and texted me constantly, trying to explain, saying I was being unfair and overreacting. She claimed that I had abandoned her emotionally when I was grieving, and that somehow justified her actions. I felt like I was going crazy. How could she blame me for her choices? I tried to focus on moving forward, but it was hard. Each day was a struggle, as I grappled with both the loss of my brother and the end of my marriage. I filed for divorce, though it wasn't an easy decision. Teresa didn't take it well. She showed up at my office one day, crying and begging for another chance, causing a scene that left my coworkers uncomfortable. I was mortified and had to have security escort her out. After that, I blocked her number for my own sanity. Teresa moved in with her parents, while I stayed in our house, though it felt empty and full of painful memories. I'm considering selling it, but the thought of going through yet another major change feels overwhelming. Through mutual friends, I've heard that Teresa has been telling people I was the one who pushed her away, that I was emotionally unavailable, and that she felt ignored. Hearing this hurts, but I remind myself that her betrayal says more about her than it does about me. I'm focusing on healing, though it's not easy. Grieving Mason while dealing with a divorce has been exhausting. I haven't told many people about Teresa's affair yet. I feel embarrassed and don't want to deal with the judgment. But I know I'll need support, especially if I decide to move and truly start fresh. I've started taking things one day at a time. Mason's absence is a constant ache, but I've learned to live with it. The betrayal from Teresa still stings, but with each day, it feels a little less raw. I'm grateful to the friends and family who've stood by me, especially Liam, who had the courage to tell me the truth when he knew it would hurt. I may not have the life I imagined with Teresa, but I have a chance to rebuild and find something real again. It's a slow journey, but I'm hopeful. Not long after our split, I heard that Teresa was telling everyone that I'd emotionally abandoned her and left her no choice but to seek comfort elsewhere. She made me sound like the villain who didn't care enough to communicate or work on our marriage. Hearing these lies spread around was both shocking and painful. It was even more upsetting when a few friends believed her side of the story. I tried to ignore the rumors, but they affected me deeply, especially when a couple of friends stopped talking to me. Losing them on top of everything else was rough. Thankfully, most of our mutual friends have been supportive, and I've learned to focus on the people who've stuck by me. The divorce itself has been a battle. Teresa has been trying to claim half of everything, even my inheritance from my late brother, Mason. Losing him was one of the hardest things I've been through, and my brother's legacy means a lot to me. The fact that Teresa would try to take part of it feels like a slap in the face. My lawyer assures me she has no legal right to any of Mason's inheritance, but that hasn't stopped her from dragging out the divorce, making things even harder. It's heartbreaking to think that someone I once loved would try to profit off my brother's death after betraying me. All of this has taken a huge toll on my mental health. I've been battling depression and trust issues, which makes it hard to keep up with my daily life. Some days, it's a struggle to get out of bed. I've lost weight, mostly because I don't have much of an appetite, and my work performance has suffered. Thankfully, my boss has been understanding about my situation. I'm grateful for the support, as it's been a struggle just to get through each day. In the midst of everything, I ran into an old friend, Olivia. We'd known each other in high school, but had lost touch over the years. We ended up reconnecting when we bumped into each other at a coffee shop, and it felt good to talk to someone who remembered me before all this mess. Olivia understands what I'm going through because she lost her mom to cancer a few years back. She gets the pain of losing a loved one and the complicated emotions that follow. She's been a friend who listens without judging and lets me vent when I need to. We both share a love of classic movies and were even on the debate team together in high school. Spending time with her has been a comforting distraction and a reminder that there are people out there who genuinely care. When Teresa found out I was spending time with Olivia, she completely lost it. She showed up at my house unannounced, shouting that I was a hypocrite for moving on so fast, while blaming her for seeking comfort elsewhere. She accused me of having an affair with Olivia, which is not true. I had to threaten to call the police before she would leave, and the entire situation felt like a nightmare. But I'm taking things one day at a time, focusing on healing, and trying to rediscover who I am outside of my relationship with Teresa. I've also been trying to honor Mason's memory in positive ways. I made a donation to the cancer center where he was treated and have been volunteering there occasionally. Spending time with his family, especially his wife, Sarah, and their kids, has been a great support. We get together for dinner often, and talking about Mason with people who loved him as much as I did has been healing. Even though there are moments when I miss Teresa and the life we had planned, I remind myself of her betrayal and everything that's happened since. It reinforces my decision to move forward. Right now, I'm not ready to think about dating seriously again. The thought of putting myself out there and risking another heartbreak is terrifying. For now, I'm focusing on rebuilding my life, healing, and taking things day by day. Once the divorce is finalized, I'll share another update. Thank you to everyone who's reached out with kind words and support. It really does help to know I'm not going through this alone. Second update, 6 months later. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and the divorce was finally finalized last week. Much to my relief, it's over. Teresa fought me every step of the way, dragging out the process and pushing for more money. In the end, we split our joint assets 50-50, and she didn't get any of my inheritance from Mason. It was a small victory, but it felt significant. The day after the divorce was official, Teresa showed up at my office in tears, begging me to reconsider and saying she'd made a terrible mistake. She even said she still loved me. I calmly but firmly told her it was over and asked her to leave. When she refused and started making a scene, security had to escort her out. It was embarrassing, and I ended up taking the rest of the day off to clear my head. I was worried my boss would be upset about the disruption, but when he called me into his office the next day, he was incredibly understanding. He shared that he'd gone through a similar experience years ago and even offered me some time off if I needed it. I felt grateful to have someone who understood. On a brighter note, things with Olivia have been going well. What started as a supportive friendship has slowly developed into something more. We've been officially dating for a couple of months now, and I couldn't be more grateful for her patience and kindness. Olivia has been there for me as I work through my trust issues, never pushing me to talk about the past unless I feel ready. We're taking things slow, spending time cooking meals together, going for long walks, and watching our favorite TV shows. She's introduced me to new music and podcasts, which have been a welcome escape. With her encouragement, I've also picked up some old hobbies that I'd forgotten about during my marriage, like playing guitar. Meanwhile, Teresa continues to badmouth me to anyone who'll listen. She's told mutual friends that I'm cold and unfeeling, and that I never loved her. She's even suggested that I must have been involved with Olivia before our divorce. While it's frustrating to hear these things, I'm trying my best not to engage. I'm focusing on rebuilding my life and spending more time with the people who matter. Spending time with Mason's family has also been helpful. His kids are growing up fast, and while it's bittersweet to watch them reach milestones Mason won't be there for, it's comforting to keep his memory alive. Last month would have been Mason's birthday, and Olivia suggested we do something special to honor him. We ended up organizing a small charity run in his name, with all proceeds going to cancer research. It felt good to channel my grief into something positive. Overall, I'm in a much better place now than I was a year ago. I still miss Mason, and there are days when the pain hits me hard, but I'm finally starting to feel hopeful about the future. I'm proud of myself for standing my ground and not letting Teresa manipulate me into reconciling. There are still tough days, of course. Some mornings, I wake up feeling angry at Teresa for everything she put me through, and other days, I miss the future we had planned. But I'm learning to sit with these feelings and let them pass. Final update, 1 year later, a year later, life has settled into a new normal. I wanted to share some final thoughts and reflect on how far I've come. Olivia and I are still together and going strong. We recently moved in together and even adopted a dog. She's been an incredible support through everything, always patient when I have moments of doubt or insecurity. Our relationship isn't perfect, we've had our share of disagreements, but we always make an effort to communicate openly and work through our issues. Being with someone who values honesty and mutual respect is refreshing. A few months ago, I ran into Teresa at a mutual friend's wedding. It was awkward, but we managed to keep things civil. She apologized again for her behavior during the divorce and told me she's been working on herself in therapy. I wished her well, but made it clear I wasn't interested in any form of relationship with her, even as friends. Seeing her stirred up a mix of emotions. Part of me felt angry all over again, but another part felt relieved. It was a reminder of how much I've grown and healed since we split. The grief over Mason still comes in waves. Some days are harder than others, especially around his birthday or the anniversary of his death. I've found healthy ways to cope, like volunteering at the hospital where he was treated. I've also been spending more time with his oldest son, who's been going through a rough patch. Being there for him feels meaningful, and I know Mason would be proud. Olivia and I have talked about our future together. We're not rushing into marriage, but we both see this relationship as long-term. The idea of having kids someday doesn't seem as impossible as it once did, even if the thought is still a little scary. Olivia makes me feel safe, and I'm grateful to have her by my side. Looking back, I can see how toxic my relationship with Teresa had become. Even before the cheating, we had grown apart, but we were both too afraid to admit it. While I'll never excuse her betrayal, I've made peace with what happened and am focused on the future. There are still moments when I wonder, what if Mason hadn't gotten sick? What if I'd noticed Teresa pulling away sooner? But I'm learning to let go and focus on the present. To anyone who's going through a similar experience, I hope my story reminds you that it does get better. Surround yourself with people who truly care, and don't be afraid to start over. You deserve to be happy and with someone who truly values you. Thank you to everyone who's supported me over the past year. I'm finally ready to move forward, and I'm genuinely excited about what the future holds.